My name's Nancy Ungerman. I'll be interviewing Larry Golman today. Today is the June 20th, and I am interviewing Larry for the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. Larry Golman, where were you born?
I was born in Dallas, Texas on September 21, 1932 at Methodist Hospital. I was, I think, the first Jewish boy ever born at that hospital. And in those days, I believe the mother stayed in the hospital for rather lengthy periods of time. And my bris was at the hospital. And although I don't remember this, I was told many times over the years that the nurses really enjoyed the wine that was served at the bris. And I've lived in Dallas all my life with the exception of 4 years at the University of Texas and 2 years serving our great country in the United States Army.
Were your parents born in Dallas?
No, my father immigrated to Dallas from Zablin, Russia on October 11th, 1893, and he subsequently brought his parents and 7 siblings to Dallas within the next 3 years or thereabouts. And my mother came with her family from Poland, which would probably be the Russian-Polish border, which has changed many times over the years. And her maiden name was Frances Goodman. And in fact, this year, I'm going to leap ahead a little bit, we're going to celebrate the 100th year of the Golman family in Dallas. We're having a weekend reunion and celebratory event, which will include a Friday night Shabbat service at Shereth Israel. We're going to have 5 generations who've been members, and a cocktail party at my nephew and niece's home, and then a brunch at Shereth Israel on Sunday.
How many will there be of you?
Well, it's a good question. Probably over 100. Just the Golman side. The Golman Goodman families, I had 35 first cousins. My mother was one of 7. My late dad was one of 8. And had 35 first cousins, majority of which lived in Dallas all their adult lives.
What got your parents to Dallas?
My father came here on October 11th, 1911, and that was the day before Columbus Day. He arrived on the ship Frankfurt from Germany in Galveston, came to Dallas. He was brought here by his Uncle Joe Sheps and Aunt Jenny Sheps, who had the Sheps Bakery, and they'd gone back to Europe and said, if you come to Dallas, we'll pay your way or something. He had gone to, I believe, Hamburg and worked 6 months in a bakery, became a master baker, came to Dallas, arrived with $2.50 gold piece, and went to work at the Sheps Bakery for 26 straight hours, which today you wouldn't do that, of course. And my mother came, I really don't know the reason her family immigrated to Dallas. They were primarily in the produce business.
Why did I think that Sheps was dairy?
Well, Sheps is a large family, and one of the late Joe Sheps' brother was had Harmon Sheps, who was in his mid-90s, and a wonderful, wonderful person. He had the Sheps Dairy. It was another branch.
I see.
Eventually, Joe Sheps' family went in the liquor business. His son Julius went in the liquor business. Of course, Julius Sheps was a great, great citizen of our community. He used to attend over 100 board meetings a month at various times. He was involved in everything that walked.
I would take for granted that your father came to escape.
Yes, he bribed, I think, probably bribed a guard at the border, which most all of them did, I guess. And he was worked at Sheps Bakery in 1921. He and a brother-in-law left and bought the bakery from Adolphus Bush of the Anheuser-Busch family. They had Adolphus Bakery in town, bought that bakery and operated for several years to about 1928, and I think it was then sold to what was called Purity Bakeries, which was a national chain which became American Bakeries, and he worked for them for 2 years, travel. He was production superintendent, was a master baker over 10 bakeries. In the height of the Depression, 1930, he and his late brother Julius Golman, who was the father of Annette Jason, and the late Joe Golman, who was a city councilman and a state legislator, started 2 bakeries, one on their own, and Golman Baking at 1835 Corinth, South Dallas, and we had Oak Cliff Baking Company at 546 East 9th Street at Marsalis in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas. And that was done in the height of the Depression when I believe, I think Bob Thornton headed the Mercantile Bank. In those days, banking was a bit different. You know, they looked at the person and their character, and they said, well, we think you're going to do well, we'll loan you the money. And they started the 2 bakeries in 1930, and eventually all of the brothers, except one, spent their livelihood, you know, in the baking business with their families.
The name of the bakery, the name of the baking business?
Well, it was Oak Cliff Baking and Golman Baking. The brand names, we were at Oak Cliff, so we had Cliff Made Bread. The Golman Bakery called their product Golman. And then we eventually changed to Wholesome Bread and then became Sunbeam Bread. And my father was very well known in Dallas. He was vice president, was the highest position in the American Bakers Association, and was over 30 years on the national board. And was very innovative in bread baking. He started sliced bread and rich bread, and had the foresight and the guts in the early 60s to change the whole baking process to a process called batter. It was a liquid type of dough made in stainless steel vats. And the brand was called Sunbeam Batter with no holes in the bread. And every nickel we ever had, we put in that baking business. Fortunately or unfortunately, it all went for trucks and equipment and modernization. And my dad was very active in the community. He was president of his congregation, Sheriff Israel. He served as a gabbai at the synagogue for numerous terms. He was instrumental in hiring Rabbi Weisfeld at the synagogue, and was the recipient of the Owen George Award, the Outstanding Citizen of Oak Cliff in 1937.
I want to back up on that. Were you born in Oak Cliff?
Yeah, well, Methodist Hop. We lived at 4009 Colonial. My family built a 2-story duplex
In
South Dallas, heart of South Dallas, and Colonial just south of Forest Lane. It was Colonial ran north-south, I guess. Forest Lane's east-west, and we had a 2-story duplex. Harry Lederers lived upstairs with Mrs. Loppheimer. I remember her name. That was the grandmother, their mother-in-law. He was a Jewish gentleman who married and converted to Christian Science. And was a salesman at E.M. Can, I believe. Wonderful family. They lived upstairs and we lived downstairs. And
until what age?
in 1939, we built a beautiful 2-story home in Stevens Park, so it would be near the baking business.
But when you lived in the duplex,
Right.
do you have any memories
Oh, yes.
of growing up?
Oh, yes. Mr. Lederer used to throw baseballs to me, pop them up, you know. He'd throw them up in the air and I'd try to catch them. He'd sit on the porch and throw them up. He was a wonderful gentleman. And I remember we lived across the street from Eva and Joe Banks. She was a Schlepak and Joe Banks was Jewish. And they had the Schlepaks had the Blue Front restaurant downtown. The Banks eventually had their own restaurant.
I love the Blue Front.
And they helped raise me, Barbara Banks, and in fact, her son-in-law is now on the board of Legacy Senior Communities in Stern. And I can remember distinctly running across the street once, almost getting hit. They saved my life. And I remember very distinctly there was a sergeant at the Dallas Police Department named Brimberry. And I was probably 4 or 5 years old, a very nice gentleman. And he took me on a motorcycle ride. In those days, they had a little cab where you could sit somebody, or a little seat to sit someone. He took me for a ride. I couldn't say Brimberry, so I called him Strawberry. Sergeant Strawberry. And I remember riding in a rumble seat in a car as a youth. In those days in South Dallas, going to Friedman's Drugstore at the corner of Grand at Harwood Streets, which was a very big hangout for the Jewish population and people generally. They had My mother loved in particular chocolate sodas, and they had a great pharmacy and drugstore there in Fountain. Then I remember my sister Anita, bless her heart, married to Charles Marcus. She and her friend, the late Marcia Golden, which is the Golden family that had the golden pickles. We had a chicken coop back of our house, and they had the bright idea they had a wooden box like a beer case or something, with handles. They tied ropes and were going to let me down from the chicken coop to the ground. I was probably 4 or 5. Unfortunately, dropped the box halfway down, but fortunately I was not hurt, so that was good. Then my sister pulled another one on me once. I started at Colonial School after finishing Mrs. Haynes' kindergarten. Mrs. Haynes, a little private school around the block where we lived. And I remember one experience at Mrs. Haynes, the late Tootsie Schwartz-Feinberg was in that class. I had a pair of maroon knickers. I think they were fairly popular in those days. And she made fun of my knickers. And a few years ago, I saw her one time. I said, Tootsie, I remember you made fun of me in those knickers. Anyway, there was a play at Colonial. I only went there half a year, first grade, started midterm. And my sister was either in it or it arranged for me to have a ticket at the front door. And I was barely 6. I got to the front door, they had no ticket. So I had to wait outside till it was all over. And it was very upsetting. But those are some young, and I remember we had a bench at the end of the bed. My parents were falling off that, breaking my collarbone. And I also remember, this is going way back, obviously. My mother, I think, used to play bridge occasionally, and the late Mrs. Harry Sussman Roxy, who was at Donosky, lovely, lovely lady. I remember once, she reminded me of it all through my life. Years later, I looked at her once and said, Roxy, you're not so cute. And she used to remind me of that. But those were, very young days. We went to Colorado on a vacation. I was 5, and I don't remember a lot about it. No, I was younger than 5, I think about 4. But I used to say Texas car. I never see a car from Texas, so I was told that. But anyway, in 1939, we built this beautiful home on 1817 West Colorado Boulevard, and moved in it early September just before my late sister went back to the University of Texas to college. And I lived there until I got married, and my father, who was then a widower, my brother lived there till the early 60s when they sold the home and moved.
I wouldn't imagine there was much Jewish population in Oak Cliff.
Oak Cliff had maybe 6 or 7 families. The A. Meyer family, who was a city councilman, who lived around the corner from us. It turns out their oldest son is now my associate, has been for about 15 years in commercial real estate, so it's a small world, Alan Meyer. And the Harry Millers, who was in the jewelry business, Lloyd's Jewelry on Jefferson, and later in life he had a store down by the athletic club on St. Paul. They lived around the corner. And then behind us on Mayflower were the Wolf family, late Phil Wolf, and he had a son named Asher who was a classmate of mine. And next to them was, at that time, Jack and Ruth Goodman lived on Mayflower and raised their family. Marydale, see, that was Marydale. And Teddy Harris's, who was like a brother to me, he was the treasurer of our bakery, worked for my dad, the family. The time he went to SMU, his only job he ever had in his whole life. And he was a wonderful man. He was president of Oak Cliff Lions, was a city councilman. They lived in Oak Cliff, as did maybe a couple other families. Most other prominent family was the Ike and Fanny Soblowskis. This chapel was named after them at Sheriff. He was a longtime Gabbai at Sheriff Israel, an honorary president. And they had no children, neither one drove. He had the Shep Soblowski Insurance Agency on Canton Street with Judy Shep's Liquor next door. And we used to often take them to Shabbat Friday night service at Sheriff. We'd drive them to Shul. And they had no children. And he was a very close friend of Conrad Hilton, because he and the late Harry Siegel bailed out Conrad Hilton. He was basically bankrupt in the mid-30s and saved his hotel business. And as a result, Mr. Soblowski had all his insurance for many years, the Hilton chain's insurance, until it got so big, he couldn't do it all. They didn't give it all to him. And I understand that Connie Hilton used to come to his house and have tea with his then wife, Eva Gabor. And some lives were wonderful. When they passed away, my brother-in-law Charles had set up a trust for them, and I now am privileged to sit on that as a trustee. My late dad used to be, and the late Saul Levine and Julia Sheps were trustees. And I think Teddy Harris was a trustee at one time. Anyway, there's 4 of us are trustees today, and we're blessed to, it's not a large foundation or trust, but we give somewhere around $45,000 a year to various beneficiaries, including Sheriff Israel, the Jewish Federation, the Legacy Senior Communities, and some others.
I would imagine that you moved to Oak Cliff because of the business.
That's correct. My father used to go almost every night to the bakery to see how things were going, because production was at night, everything was baked at night. And so he would go there every night. So that was the main reason. I went through Rosemont Elementary School. There was one other Jewish person in my class, David Shryo, who was married to Lillian, who is a sister of Dr. Irwin Ornish. And David moved away to go to Kaufman, Texas, in about the 3rd grade. And I can remember distinctly there was a fellow who went all through grammar school, junior high, high school, and college with me, Dick Ford, who turns out used to live a few blocks right off North Haven here. Eventually, anyway, he and David used to have fights. I remember that distinctly. Also, I remember I used to be requested to stay in after school sometimes for talking. So I'd do that during class sometimes. And my late father used to come get me, because one time I remember I had to go somewhere. He said, "Can I let my son out early because I have to take him somewhere?" But I was the only Jewish kid. Asher Wolf eventually came there, I think.
Any experiences with anti-Semitism?
Never had any, really, which is sort of surprising. I went to Griner Junior High School. I remember VJ Day, I guess 1945, when the war was over. They asked people to speak, address over the loudspeaker, and I'm Jewish. I was one of the couple Jews there, I guess, and I spoke then. Then I went to Sunset High School. We had anywhere from 3 to 6 Jewish students. Sunset today is probably 95% Hispanic school.
So your experience with this part of the world didn't start until after high school, after college?
After when I really got married, I guess. Yeah, but at Oak Cliff, my dad was president of the Chamber of Commerce. Oak Cliff Tribune had a Man of the Month. He got the first award they ever gave. In 1934, Methodist Hospital, which today is a fabulous institution, had they had 2 chairmen in a row, Jewish chairmen, Harold Kleiman and Selwyn Belosky, in recent times. But they asked him to chair a fund drive because they were basically broke. And he said, "You want me, a Jewish guy, to head the Methodist Hospital fund drive?" He said, "We want you." And they helped raise $400,000, which was a lot of money in 1934, obviously.
What are your experiences with religious school, and where mostly did you go? It was in South Dallas. When did it move?
Well, Sheriff Israel moved in the 50s. I can remember going to religious school at Sheriff, and I remember very distinctly my first rabbi, Raphael Gold, who was a brilliant man who became a psychiatrist. And as a youth, I can remember he came to our home for dinner one time with a Dr. Ettlinger, who was a brilliant professor at the University of Texas. I'm not sure today if mathematics or what department. And after dinner, they had this conversation that nobody knew what they were talking about. I mean, they were 2 brilliant guys. Rabbi Gold, Cantor Reuben Kaplan was our cantor. He was a jack of all trades. He had 3 jobs. He was a cantor, he also was a moil, and he was a shechet. He used to kill chickens in his backyard, kosher chickens. He lived at the corner of Harwood and South Boulevard on the northwest corner. Temple Emmanuel was, I believe, on the southeast corner. And I can remember going way back there to Rabbi Lefkowitz's, maybe his 25th anniversary at Temple. I'm not sure now. My dad was president sheriff, so it was about 1945 or 6 when we got to sit on the front row. But I went to religious school at Cherith Israel. We used to, one time we had a new teacher about every 3 or 4 weeks because we'd drive the teachers crazy. Basically run them off. And I remember one time we had some gentlemen that hid behind a door that had an annex building. And we used to have classes out there sometime. It was a little 2-story house. And we had a teacher come in, and 2 or 3 of my fellow students hid behind a door, jumped out and screamed and frightened the teacher. And so we had a new teacher 2 weeks later. And then I can remember Cherith Israel sank $40,000 into going to build an educational or another building. They built the foundation, and that was it. And it stayed there forever. The Jewish Community Center was right around the corner at 1817 Pocahontas. And I joined AZA, as I remember as a kid, but I didn't really like it too much, so I really wasn't too involved. But during High Holy Day services, we sat in the back or next to the back row. We had the Golman family. In those days, the whole family had a couple of rows. And they were not individual seats, they were just bench seats with chair backs. And a lot of people used to go out to the city park, which is outside the front door, and spend half the time, particularly kids, most of the time at City Park. Those were good days. I had the first air-conditioned bar mitzvah at Cherith Israel on September 1st, 1945. My father was president. We were just putting in air conditioning. And to think of going to Holy Day services in August and September in that 100-degree with no air conditioning, we put it in the week of my bar mitzvah. And I can remember having the first air-conditioned bar mitzvah September 1st, 45.
I bet there was a terrific turnout.
Well, I don't remember a lot about that. I remember confirmation. We had, I think, 21 boys and 5 girls. 5 ladies, 21 males. One of them was a Ungerman. Sorley Ungerman was in my class, and the late Tootsie Schwartz, Feinberg, and there were 5. Helen Rachowski, I think, was in that class. There were 5 of us, 5 ladies.
Did your parents keep kosher?
My parents did until about 1937. My father had ulcers very badly, went to Mayo Clinic, and they did wonders for his ulcers. He had really bad ulcers, and after that we did not keep kosher.
Tell me, how did you meet your wife?
How did I meet my wife? That's a very good story. That was probably the best day of my life. That was July 5th, 1957. I was drafted in the United States Army on October 15th, 1956. I got a terrific train ride to El Paso to Fort Bliss for 17 hours to basic training. I'll never forget getting off the train. They said, "You're in the Army now." It's about 1 a.m. standing attention. It's rather a rude awakening. I was a 24-year-old law school graduate. There's one gentleman I met on the train named Luther Parker. And anyway, we got off this train. Going out there, I met a gentleman who became bunkmates through basic training, which helped save my sanity, named Luther Parker, who had gone to Sunset when I did, University of Texas when I did, whom I did not know until we went on the train together. He was the vice president of Dougherty's drugstore, so he was rather intelligent young gentleman. Most of them were young kids. There were 2 Jewish guys drafted with me. Jerry Chris, who is a the brother of Phyllis Prager, and the late Buddy Michelson was also drafted then. But got to basic training. Of course, most of them were 17 and 18-year-olds. And I remember having this little cubicle. There were 4 of us. Terrebonne and Street, 2 other guys. They were from Louisiana, and one of them couldn't read, so I had to read his mail from his daughter to him. But anyway, I got through basic training. I'll go my whole Army story, it would be another week. But I went through clerk typist school for 8 weeks. And as a lawyer, I had a chance to become a judge advocate general and officer, but I turned it down because that was 3 years, and I was drafted for 2 years. I did not want to spend the extra year. So I wound up as keep personnel records for a month or two, and then we had a major named Chester L. Gouch, regular Army, 1939, enlisted, spent his life in the Army, rough and gruff, but he had something like him to me. He says, Golman, I want you to be my legal advisor for this regiment of about 2,300 people. So I got my own office. I reached the rank of Specialist 5, and I'd give him legal advice about should you court-martial a guy or something of that nature. I really didn't do a lot, I lived off base. In fact, my last 17 months, they let me do that because they trusted me, I guess. And on July 5th, 1957, a fraternity brother, a pledge brother of mine, who was a doctor in the Air Force from El Paso, was in town, and he called me, and I'd taken out a few ladies there, and I'd heard my wife's name, Gay Geller, and I planned to take her out. Let's have a date with this Gay Geller. Would you go with us? So we did. I went out with him. That's where I met her. And he left town, and I called her the next week. And July 12th, 1957, we went out together.
Did you remain friends with?
Well, ironically, he lives in Dallas. We're not real close, particularly over the years. Since I lost my darling, we've become very, very close friends, he and his wife, and been lovely to me. Unfortunately, he's quite ill right now. It's Arnold Casanoff. Arnold and Dorothy Jane Casanoff. But anyway, went out July 12th. Gay was finishing her freshman year, just finished her freshman year at Sophie Newcomb in New Orleans, and went back to school. And we corresponded some. And I took out someone here intermittently, and she came back to El Paso the following summer of 1958. And on August 30th, 1958, a couple of weeks after my late, very close friend Ed Jenikov had come through town with his bride Sally on their honeymoon and met Gay, and said, you need to marry her. So August 30th, the first time I told her I loved her, and we got engaged September 4th, 1958. And we're married November 30th, 1958 in El Paso.
And you were married for how many years?
43 years and 1 month and 2 days.
And you had children?
3 children. We were blessed with 3 children, which are now 6 children, because they're all married, terrific people. Son Mark was born July 14th, 1961. And then our daughter was born November 5th, 1963, and then son David, a redhead, not red anymore, was born the same day as my father's birthday. It was a very lovely birthday present for my father, gay-induced labor, and he was born April 15th, 1965.
Do they live in Dallas?
The 2 sons and my daughters, my marriage live in Dallas with 6 of my grandchildren. Our daughter Elaine and family, son Ken Wolf, live in San Antonio. They have 4 boys. The Lord has been very good to me in many ways. I have 10 grandchildren, 8 boys and 2 girls.
And most of them live here. One
2 of the 3 couples live
Yeah.
here, and 6 of the 10 grandchildren. My Dallas grandchildren call me Larry, because my late father Jake wanted his grandchildren to call him Jake, and I'm very big on tradition. I'm very big on that. And my daughter wants them to call me Zadie. Her kids in San Antonio, so they call me Zadie.
It's hard to keep up with all these names.
It's hard to keep up with their birthdays,
Yes.
but we have a lot of fun together. We spend a lot of time together.
You said you're big on tradition. How did you spend the Jewish holidays growing up, and how does
Well,
it transcend?
Growing up, of course, we always went to shul and had family dinners, seders, Rosh Hashanah. And December 25th, all the years, we would have lunch, because that was the only day the bakery would close. So we all have big luncheon on the 25th of December. Since I lost my darling, we still have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Pesach. My daughter Elaine comes from San Antonio, and we have the second Seder at our house. We have 2 Seders. The second Seder's at my house. We have the second day of Rosh Rosh Hashanah at my house, and we have break the fast at my house, which we generally have about 38 or 40, 42 people.
So you kept up the tradition.
Well, basically due to my children and my daughter primarily, but we have kept it up. And every Shabbat when I can do it, I kept up the tradition that my wife and I had of having children over for Friday night dinner. As the grandchildren get older, they have their own activities, you see a little bit less, but we try to have them every Friday night. And I'd say 90% of the time we do that.
That's wonderful.
And unfortunately for them, I do the cooking, which are rather simple.
Really?
Oh yeah, simple meals.
What's a simple meal?
Basically 3 different meals, either steak and or fish, or pasta and pizza, or all-American night, which consists of hamburgers and kosher hot dogs.
Good for you, Larry.
But and gentlemen are rather selfish as they go through life. They do not realize the work and involvement that a wife goes through in preparing meals, often 3 meals a day all their lives for 30, 40, 60 years. And I found out just to prepare Friday night dinner, it's several hours of going to the store and preparing and setting the table and washing the vegetables, whatever you do. It's a lot of work involved. And,
Well, I hope you're appreciated, because that
Well,
is a lot of work.
but it's fun. I enjoy it. And we have Kiddush. First we light the candles, then we have Kiddush, do the whole Kiddush. Have a motzi and a shechianu, and then we have dinner.
To backtrack a little, you went to law school. Well, in high school, did you mention that you worked with your father?
Not really. I did the summer, worked in the office in the summer. I went to Sunset High School. I went to the 50th reunion, but I have not too many friends with Sunset, truthfully.
So from there,
I went to the University of Texas.
and you went to law school.
I went to the University of Texas for 4 years, and I was very active. And I guess I may have inherited that from my father. I became very active. When I started college, I was 16, turned 17 during my first semester, first month actually. Didn't know too much, nothing about nothing. I was fairly shy, believe it or not, and didn't know much about women, and had really not gone out a great deal prior to going to college. But I joined a fraternity, Sigma Alpha Mu Psi, and I was very active. I was secretary recorder of the fraternity. I was interfraternity council for 3 years and was secretary of interfraternity council. I just started playing tennis about my junior year in high school. I never played high school tennis. And I went out for the tennis team. They had a wonderful, wonderful tennis coach who was a Greek professor, Dr. D.A. Penick, and he allowed me to play on the tennis team. And I lettered on the freshman team. Got to play 1 varsity match, got a reserve varsity letter. It's a highlight of my athletic career. And turned down to be tennis team manager because I didn't feel I wanted to put up nets and wash clothing and stuff. But I got a fraternity brother that job. I was very active in politics on campus, and I was Silver Spur, which is one of the 2 honorary fraternities, or not fraternities, organizations on campus. I ran a political campaign for a fraternity brother for vice president. He lost by about 3 votes, which caused me to cry a great deal, personally. But I really enjoyed my 4 years at the university. Made a great number of friends, many of which are still my closest friends, probably.
But you went to law school.
I was accepted to law school at the University of Texas, and the summer of 1953 was a very cruel one to my family. My mother died on, she died on August the 2nd, 1953, which was my sister Anita's birthday. I was buried on her own birthday the next day, and then 19 days later, my oldest sister passed away here in Dallas, who lived in Tulsa, was married, but Jimmy Aston, who was president of Republic Bank, helped my dad get a plane to bring her to Dallas. She had nephritis, kidney disease. In those days, there was 0 they could do. And she died 19 days thereafter. devastate our family, of course. And I decided to stay home and go to law school here at SMU, which I did.
But are you an attorney?
I am an attorney. I've not practiced. I practiced a little bit when I graduated law school before I was drafted in the Army. And I've kept my license all the years by taking legal education. When you reach age 70, you're exempt from that. But I've kept my license all these years. And when I got out of the Army, I chose to go into the family baking business as opposed to practicing law. I probably should practice law, but I went in the family baking business, which I was in that till 1972, when unfortunately we had to take bankruptcy. We had a competitor, Manor Bakery, that was door to door, part of the Campbell Tiger Corporation, and they decided to go wholesale because door to door is very expensive, and to do that they spent about $2 million, which was a little bit more than our treasury had, about $1,950,000, and they would give grocers free bread, or for every one they'd buy, every 10 they'd give them a free one, and just really bought their way into business, which caused us to file an antitrust lawsuit against them, which we settled after we went out of business. We took bankruptcy, and the day after the Cowboys won their Super Bowl, the law firm Ungerman had recommended we use a gentleman named Philip Palmer, who went into bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And he looked at it, I'll never forget, he says, "You're the only people I've ever had in bankruptcy that walked away, have nothing in your pockets." But that's just the way we lived our life. We were honest.
Phil Palmer was a character.
Yeah, he was. But that was sort of not a very pleasant time in our life. I had a very good friend in El Paso who had a wealthy friend of his, and they invested some money in the business, and we kept it running another year and a half after that, but finally started running out of steam.
And your career now?
That's when I went to real estate brokerage. I had some friends. I couldn't determine whether to go into practicing law, which I'd been 15 years out of law school. I think you have to go to school all over again. Or I had some friends that had done pretty well in real estate brokerage. So I went to commercial real estate brokerage with the Piercy Kristen firm for about a year and a half, which I starved to death. And then I went with the Steve Stringer and his mother Paula Stringer. They had a very small commercial operation. I stayed there about 5 years till they sold out to Merrill Lynch, which was their first venture. Merrill Lynch's into commercial, or into real estate. And the Stringers asked my advice. They said, "It only comes around once. When a big ship comes, you better grab it. If not, Ebby Halliday or someone will take that money." And they did that, and I stayed 4 years. It was, company knew nothing about real estate. It was not very, I wasn't geared for that, I guess, working for some large national firm. So in January 1985, I opened my own office, me, myself, and I, January 15th, 85, and I have 2 associates, one who's licensed, is not active, and one who is active. I've been doing that I've had this on my own little firm for 26 years now.
What is your involvement with the Jewish community now?
Well, now, that's a good question. Less than it used to be. The late Everett Rosenberg got me started in the Jewish community. I had done a lot of stuff. I worked on about 10 campaigns of fundraising for non-Jewish entities. I could go through them all, but you'd be here a long time. I was vice president of the Dallas Association of Retarded Children. I served as president of the Texas Sex Students Association of Dallas. I was president of the Texas Bakers Club when I was in the baking business. Anyway, I think Everett got me involved in the Jewish community, and I had the privilege of serving about 12, 14 years on the board of the Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas. Headed their planning allocation committee at one time. Very active in campaign a number of years. I was on the board of the Jewish Communities Foundation, headed the real estate committee for 10 years. I served on the Holocaust board. I was on the board of Shereth Israel and secretary of Shereth Israel at one time, on the education board and investment committee. Also served on the board 2 years at Solomon Schechter School, which is now the Levine Academy. I have currently vice president of the North Haven Campus Corporation, which is the umbrella organization that owns title to the Jewish Community Center and Federation properties. And I've served the last number of years on the, probably about 15 years on the board of the Dallas Home for Jewish Aged, now known as Legacy Senior Communities.
When do you have time to go to work?
Well, I used to kid my late wife, bless her memory, that the reason God invented Shabbat was there no meetings on Friday. Because there were times in my life I'd go to a meeting Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. But the home has become my sort of passion now, I guess. I served as vice president treasurer of Golden Acres, which the home no longer owns. I've been on the board of Golden Acres, successor at Legacy at Preston Hollow, and I've served on the board of Legacy Senior Communities, the umbrella organization, for 15 years, or 12, 14 years. One of the things that I probably enjoyed the most was I've done a little pro bono real estate work for the Salesmanship Club of Dallas, helping them acquire some land for
The what?
the Salesmanship Club of
Oh.
Dallas, which I'm a life member. Acquire some land for the expansion of the J. Eric Johnson Community School, which is a phenomenal thing in Oak Cliff, and acquired some land for like High DAs, which is some sort of semi-free housing for those that needed housing. But in the Jewish community, I was chairman of the real estate committee and helped sell a property donated to the foundation by the late Lawrence Pollock and his wife Hortense, where they kept a life estate in their residence, 8.4 acres at Deloach and Preston, and I helped sell that property to the late Fred Barron and his wife, who built that monstrous house there. Also, I chaired the real estate committee of the Legacy, or the home, and acquired 8 acres of land for an assisted living facility at Ohio at Shepherd and Plano, which we never built because that was been a financially ruinous thing to do. Helped sell that and acquire the 24 acres where Legacy at Willow Bend is now. So I guess that's about $14 million of real estate acquisitions that I just did because I thought that was a thing to do. But that's probably the highlight of my real estate career, more than the one that I work here today, but I enjoy doing that. You got to give back a little bit to pay for the space that God gives you on this earth.
Well, you've done a
And that's
beautiful
something I
job with
enjoy
that.
doing.
In this interview, you talk about so many wonderful people in your life, so this is a hard question. Who are your 2 or 3 or 4 role models
Well,
throughout your life?
probably my father, and my family, and this tennis coach at the University of Texas. He was a fabulous guy, Dr. D.A. Pinnick. Dr. Pinnick, he was never cursed, never said a swear word, and just was a wonderful human being. And there have probably been some others. Jack Evans, who was a good friend of my family and father's, was a tremendous gentleman. Dallas has been blessed with some tremendous non-Jewish and Jewish citizenry of this community. And there are probably some others, if I stop and think about it.
Is there anything that you might want to add that I have left out?
Well, I have 2, in my latter years of my mature years, it's a good way to say that, I have 2 rather simple philosophies that I live by, and I tell people this, some sort of laugh and some say, that's pretty good stuff. One is, and my grandkids and children have been wonderful to me and keep me young, and I have a philosophy, and I've had this for some years, I'm just a kid waiting to grow up. And if God blesses you with reasonably good health and the ability to get around, you should enjoy life and have a good outlook on life. And the other is, if you're blessed with, if you get up in the morning and put on your your shoes yourself, which a lot of people cannot do, and turn on the lights yourself. And if you're blessed with a wife or husband or children, let them know you love them each and every day. Get in your car, and either go to work or volunteer or whatever you do in life. If you do that, you're very fortunate, because whether you're 20, 40, 80, whatever your age, you don't know what tomorrow may bring. And you're really blessed when you can do those things.
Well, you've been a pleasure to interview.